Hello, my name is Caden. I'm chronically online. I'm an ADHD freak of a human and a musician. Today, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite genres of all time. A genre I've become so attached to personally and identified with ever since I've discovered it. A genre that is, generally speaking, losing popularity as the years go on. Only a few artists have managed to survive in the space. We're going to talk about how the genre started, its peak, some of the most influential releases, and some of my personal favorites by some of my favorite artists in the space, why it started dying, and why it's not picking up steam again with all the other resurgence genres, and hopefully find the answer to why an IDM resurgence hasn't happened yet. IDM, short for Intelligent Dance Music, is a genre of electronic music that emerged in the early 1990s in the United Kingdom. It is characterized by its experimental approach, drawing from styles such as techno, ambient, and acid house, and is often considered more suited for attentive listening than for dancing. Now, I'm sure that we can all agree whoever decided to name a type of music intelligent made a ridiculous decision, and the guy's probably a snobby piece of shit who thinks he's better than every other four-on-the-floor average house music enjoyer. The term IDM comes from the mailing list and magazine from the 90s covering the scene of weird electronic music. After a 1992 compilation record released by Warp Records, Artificial Intelligence, featuring some of the pioneers and creators of the genre. IDM arguably had its peak of release in the early 90s and popularity of the genre in the late 90s. Using this graph on Rate Your Music, you can see within the past couple of years, IDM releases have slowly started coming out more, but no year has touched the peak in 2001. Which leads me to believe this genre has yet to see the resurgence it needs. As every other niche, nerdy genre from before our time has exploded, IDM has stagnated in releases, as in fanfare. Today, I'm going to try and figure out why that is, and how maybe we could find a resurgence for the genre. Now that we've got a basic idea on the genre and its stagnancy, who are some of the artists that makes this kind of music? We have to talk about the GOAT, Aphex Twin, also known as Richard D. James. Richard James, born in Ireland in 1971, moved and was raised in Cornwall, England. He started creating music when he was about 12 to 14 years old, according to him at least. It's hard to accredit him with anything because he's known for being such a chronic troller and liar when it comes to anything public about him and interviews he's done. What we do know about Richard is that he started playing DJ sets at parties and raves in southwest England in the late 80s. Gaining a strange reputation for his idiosyncratic songs and strange drum patterns, he started playing more shows and released his first work under the name AFX, called Analog Bubble Bath in 1991. It's hard to find any first of a genre this complex in Umbrella, so let's just say it was one of the first in the space. The only reason this record came out is because Richard was tripping off some substances at one of his raves, and label guys came up to him backstage and pressured him to sign a contract to release an LP. So if it wasn't for a specific substance made by scientists and predatory businessmen, there would be no Aphex Twin. For music so odd and creative, it only makes sense it was created this way. The actual sound of this debut EP fucking rocks. So weird and trancy and ambient. The drums create this space that these sounds should go together traditionally and gives off intentional purpose just to sound different from the rest of the music being played. I think that's where a lot of Richard's sonic choices and other IDM artists for that matter come from, just to sound different from the noise of the average late 90s British rave. Regardless, it makes me feel hollow yet alive. It sounds atmospheric. It makes me feel like it's being played in a cavernous space with concrete walls and no sunlight or windows in sight. This EP reeks of MDMA, and sweaty shirtless men losing their fucking minds on the dance floor. I can't imagine having a thought while listening to this. After Analog Bubble Bath's success, he founded a record label and released his magnum, Selected Ambient Works 85 to 92. Featuring, in my opinion, the best electronic music ever made. Genuinely, I'm not joking, this album is an all-time top 5 for me, and it will remain to stay there until the day I die when I'm 90 years old. No matter how many times I hear it, it still excites me and entertains me with its never-ending trancing vibes it gives me. Extol might be the Christian interpretation of God coming through Richard himself to present the greatest interpretation of sound created through machines. The perfect loop of drums and the tranciest pad loops you've ever heard, basking with the reverberated vocal chant that will leave you craving more of whatever the fuck it gave you. Seriously, an incredible piece of music, and I fear he stumbled into the peak of sound with a single track. This album doesn't let up though. Every single song on this album solely defies the genre in my opinion. Richard loves a weird ambient earworm over an insanely catchy, unique drum machine loop. The whole project stays around the same tempo, so it almost all kind of feels like it's the same song and blends together perfectly. Remember when I said he started making music at 12 to 14? The claim and belief comes from this album. If these songs are a collection of music starting from 1985, doing the math, he was born in 1971. So he was arguably 14 years old when making some of these godlike tracks. Either he was a modern Mozart, or he's just lying. Either way, it's like the digicore era, hyperpop era all over again with 15-year-olds making bangers. I don't fully buy it though. Most people believe that the actual things he made when he were 14 for this album were maybe some samples or drums or weird loops or parts of maybe one or two of the songs. And it was just a weird way that Richard likes to show off how cool and good he was without actually saying it. Usually when you think ambient music, you'd think like C418, slow, beautiful compositions mashed together in a transition, making wonderfully peaceful background music to your life or an activity you're participating in. But no, this is a completely different kind of ambient. It's the kind of ambient that you would dance to. In my opinion, it's far from ambient. It's demanding. Despite what Richard claims, I think this album defines the genre perfectly and sits as a prime example of what this sound is and should be. No matter how much I want to get carried away timeline-wise, this video isn't necessarily linear and chronological. Aphex didn't create this genre solely, and a lot of the foundations of this genre were built quickly by multiple artists. Selected ambient works came out a little bit after the whole genre and term and culture was being formed as a thing. So let's talk about some other artists that formed this baby from the ground up. Autechre. Autechre is an influential electronic music duo from Rochdale, England, consisting of Rob Brown and Sean Booth. Known for their innovative and abstract approach to electronic music, Rob and Seth met as teenagers in the 1980s, bonding over their shared love of hip-hop, electro, and early electronic music, influenced by artists like Kraftwerk, Africa Bambaataa, and 808 State. They began experimenting with synthesizers, drum machines, and sampling techniques. The duo started releasing music in the late 1980s under various names, but they formally adopted the moniker Autechre in the late 1990s. Their debut album, Incunabula, 1993, released on Warp Records, fucking rocks. I'm not a huge Autechre guy, despite what my appearance and music taste should show. I think it's just a little bit too weird out of my wheelhouse. I'll stay with my Aphex Twin. Thank you very much, Autechre. But shout out my Autechre lovers. I know many people and many friends who love and adore these two and what they've done for electronic music. Instead of super ambient reverb stuff that someone like Aphex would do, they tend to lean into a more dialed-in synth sound like saw waves and arps complemented by complex, yet interestingly jammy drum patterns. Sometimes the songs sway into really beautiful patterns and melodies with the synths and rare pads they use to build intros and bridges and outros really well into each other. They also love using weird vocal samples and flipping them into strange chants that work into the hooks of the beats. You'll find flipping weird vocals is a common thing in IDM as you dive deeper into the genre. I love how airy they can sound, yet way more close and defined than Aphex can be. Aphex and Autechre can be closely related, yet very opposed sonically, at least when you compare their debuts. The duo has a massive discography that you can dive into for hours, so if you're into this album or you like the way I'm talking about it, please go listen to their discography. They have a huge one. Overall, Autechre is known for pushing the boundaries of electronic music, creating complex and often dissonant compositions. Their work blends elements of electro, techno, and ambient and industrial, often deconstructing traditional rhythms and melodies into abstract forms. They frequently use custom-built software and hardware, giving their music a unique, futuristic edge. The duo continues to release music, often in ambitious formats, so please go listen to their music. They have an 8-hour album if you want to go dive into it. Speaking for IDM, Autechre is one of the most respected in the scene and one of the most successful. Their philosophy reflects deeply into the genre's roots and counterculture response. One of the most respected acts in IDM in electronic music history. Now that we've talked about some of the GOATs, let's talk about my personal favorite, which is also one of the GOATs. Boards of Canada. I'll talk about the big three and move on since we're covering other subjects. This duo is my second personal favorite, and my personal favorite that I tell people when I don't want to say I like Aphex Twin because I want to be unique and different like every other kid on the block. Boards of Canada is a Scottish electronic duo consisting of Michael Sanderson and Marcus Eoin. Now, Boards is a tad later than the before mentioned artist, started and signed to Warp in 1996, which if you remember is 6 years after this genre genre was coined. They were a tad late to the party, but ultimately kept the party going after it died down a little bit. Boards of Canada, in my opinion, was a later advancement of the sound and sonic profile the genre has so harshly defined, using a more melodic instrumentation, generally more traditional song structure, but at times even using more experimental and droning ambience and untamed drum machines to create unworldly combinations of sonic presence. They used a lot of field recording samples and analog synths from the 70s to 80s to produce their music, which leads to a very alien, warm sound. Their debut is good, but nothing to write home about. High Scores featuring Turquoise Hexagon Sun, a song that remained on their debut album, is the highlight of this project. A beautiful pattern of synth and weird choppy talking in the back, surrounded by air as a possessed drummer chirps over the track, hitting an unfamiliar yet rumbling drum pattern. Now, their debut album, Music Has the Right to Children, released in 1998, is the pinnacle of a more palatable version of what Autechre and Aphex Twin paved the way for. The banging drums contrast beautifully to the amazingly catchy synth melodies constructed on each track. Along with the chopping vocals built into every song is an IDM staple. I think my favorite song is Telephasic Workshop or Roy G. Biv, the latter being my favorite of the two. Roy G. Biv is such a catchy, beautiful, perfect song in my opinion. It's happy and delightful, but not corny and in a perfect way. Boards is an amazing group to go dive into if you want an intro to this genre. It's pretty palatable compared to the other two projects I've talked about. Go give this album a try, please. I love this album so much. Okay, so now that we've talked about some of the artists that have paved the way for this genre and created beautiful music in it, let's actually talk about the question in the context of what I'm answering here. To discover why IDM hasn't had its glory resurgence in the mainstream yet, we must understand what IDM's purpose was in its creation, and what its intention was. IDM was way more of a response to an oversaturated, underflavored scene of techno music than it was a statement itself. The music was made with intention of deeper listening and focus on sound design and structure rather than just being high on key and LSD and dancing your brain to crash in a rave. The genre came out of a response from artists who got tired of the norm, artists who wanted more of a potential medium who saw room for advancement and experimentation that wasn't being explored currently. It's easier to define IDM by what it does not do than what it does do. In that nature, it can really do anything. So with the intention of the genre being a response, you could connect the dots and see how this genre hasn't resurfaced yet. It has nothing to respond to? Maybe the musical culture's zeitgeist hasn't stepped too comfortably into each other's shoes to entice artists to step so far out of the way they create something new entirely. Or, hear me out, it's the opposite. Maybe due to the internet niche rate your music culture today, we've experienced so much experimentation in different styles and interpretations of music of a bygone era that a resurgence of core IDM hasn't been able to flourish, due to intention being swallowed by how experimental so much music is nowadays. Why has Aphex Twin's Drux gotten so much attention on TikTok with its beautiful melodies and nostalgic palette for memes, but we haven't seen any basketball edits with Boards of Canada? Maybe we need to find some new IDM, view the response to it, and view the future of the sound, rather than hark on why these artists from the 90s haven't grown significantly when every other niche genre from a time before Gen Z has exploded in popularity. That brings me to artist 96 Back with Tender Exit. 96 Back, born Evan Swift in Sheffield, England, is a British electronic music producer and DJ known for his innovative fusion of genres such as electro, IDM, ambient, and grime. His most recent album, Tender Exit, just came out 2 weeks ago as the recording of this video, a heavy IDM electro dance album that focuses heavily on sound design. This album is fucking crazy. The sound design, the build-ups, and the drops, all sonically experimental and droning. They are definitely heavier than traditional IDM, yet it's satisfying to hear a good new IDM release. I love the synth work and how textured a lot of these sounds are, so why isn't this album as popular as the ones from the 90s if it's achieving a lot of what they did? I think it's due to the audience. 96 Back is a relatively successful producer for the space. With 15k listeners and thousands of streams on the new album, new IDM just does not have the audience compared to old IDM. It's nearly two different music scenes. One of them compromised of Gen X analog producers and DJs' counterculture response to the oversaturation of their own scene, scene, and the others a generation of young producers using DAWs focusing on sound design and exploration of genres. They don't correlate as well as you'd hope. The older group has gained a reputation for the young generation to explore the genre through their means, but the younger producers participating in the genres do not get a spotlight due to there being no precedent for new IDM. Regardless of my thoughts on this scene, I think this album fucking rocks, so please go listen to it if you've been craving a newer IDM sound, which may lead me to my answer. I think the answer of where IDM is lies in its influence to other mediums of electronic and hip-hop music. Let me cook. Go listen to this song, Shake It Like a Jane Remover remix featuring Frost Children and Danny Brown. I think this song might be the answer to the question. Listen to the production of this song. This song is blowing up in the underground right now, and a lot of people are loving this song. This song uses IDM drums and weird melodic synth strips scattered through the beat. It sounds like a weird IDM song with 808s and vocals chopped and rapped on it. Plus the drop where all the frequency goes out of the window and becomes a mess of sound. That's very IDM. I believe the answer for where did IDM go is in the music we listen to now. Scattered through the niche electronica music we all enjoy are hints/parodies of IDM's rich history in these songs. I think another good example of this is Scrapyard by Autechre. I know I've talked about Autechre in like every single one of my videos, but Autechre is just a forefront for everything that I like. So, speaking of Scrapyard, that album has a lot of weird sonic drums and synths that are reminiscent of IDM's past. Another artist I want to quickly mention is Igloo Ghost. His album Tidal Memory EXO feels the closest to a fleshed out modern IDM album with vocals. He's rapping his ass off over insanely produced rhythm, D&B, and trance beats. The combination makes for this otherworldly sound, combining the elements of IDM into the drums and scattering them throughout. Listen to Boy by Two Hollis. Influences again of rhythm, D&B, and Aphex Twin littered throughout the production of this album. Edward Skeletrix is a rapper that uses a lot of insane beats that are nearly touching IDM levels of production and complexity in the rhythm and synths. Hypochondriac by Breakins uses IDM drums throughout the entirety of the album. Every single drum sound is unique, fresh, and crisp. Sounds like he constructed them using some sort of software or crazy levels of splicing and clipping different samples together. Listen to Nate Sibb's very low-key electropop. Reminds me a lot of the mannerisms of Aphex style of electronic, with its ambience and reverb followed by tailed calm drum patterns with a Justin Bieber-like vocal tone. Listen to Every Dog Has Its Day by Glaive. It uses a lot of IDM-type synths and ridiculous 808s and cool drums with an IDM flair. Sadly, there's a lot of music in the underground that has hints of IDM. There's a lot of artists in the underground right now that are coming up that are influenced by IDM music. Sadly, the core IDM sound will probably never be as popular as it once was, but its influence and remnants are found scattered in the production of so many up-and-coming producers and artists. Will we ever see a core revival of the sound to the likes of 96 Back and other recent IDM releases? I doubt it. I think the context of modern IDM is in the subconscious of the newest and freshest sounding music coming out right now by a younger generation, influenced by the genre's counterculture experimentalism and do whatever the fuck you want isms that the most popular IDM artists pursued so closely. The love for this sound and genre will likely never die, but the concept of a fresh core IDM album taken into the mainstream, I would say, is highly unlikely. I think that's the answer to the title of this video. Anyways guys, my name is Caden. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, subscribe it. I don't care. Follow me on Instagram in the description if you want to tap in with me. Oh, here's a cool one. Would you guys be interested in me starting a Discord for all you nerdy fucks? Anyways guys, go listen to my music. Go listen to my friends' music. I love y'all. Thank y'all so much for watching. Bye bye.